Hello epidemiology students and welcome to week 2. For this week you can access the online module by clicking the week 2 lecture on the home page if you'd like. And then once you click that, it will take you to the week 2 module. To get started, make sure you click this week 2 overview. This is going to give you information on what we're covering this week in terms of learning outcomes as well as the tasks that you need to complete. So for this week, we're going to be talking about association and causality. How do we actually establish a causal relationship between variables of interest versus just finding mathematical associations? By the end of this week, you should be able to describe the difference between association and causality. They are not the same thing. We're going to learn about frameworks and models that we use in epidemiology to establish causation. You should be able to describe types of associations and define terminology used in inferential statistics, and also identify what it means to have statistically significant results in epidemiological studies. So for this week, you need to complete the online module. There are some problems embedded in some of the pages to illustrate some of the things that we're talking about. So for example, when you learn about necessary versus sufficient causes, just reading about what those definitions are isn't totally clear in understanding those concepts. So you've got some problems that you should attempt to do in the module, and then there's a video that goes over the answers in that module. So make sure to do those. There is also a discussion that you'll need to complete this week. Your initial post is due Thursday and your reply is due Sunday. And then as always, you have these optional practice problems here that are not worth any points. You can take those to get some additional practice with the material, and hopefully that will help in understanding any areas that maybe aren't super clear at this point. You also need to read chapter 6 of the textbook, which you can download that PDF via that link there. And one other big announcement is that for your lab, you need to come in to the week 2 lab with your group with your research question that you've identified. So this should be an independent variable and a dependent variable that you're going to examine for your group project for lab. For this week's discussion post, your initial post is due Thursday and your reply is due on Sunday. This post is going to focus on association and causality. So when we're looking at associations between some sort of factor and some health outcome, it's challenging to determine whether that factor is just associated with the disease or whether it's actually a causal factor of that disease. So in this particular scenario, you've got this fictional class action suit that was brought by 60 infertile couples in whom the male was a heavy drinker of this soft drink called Alpine Fizz. The people suing the company that makes this drink, they're suing and they're claiming that a dye that was included in the drink called Yellow Dye 5, they're claiming that it causes low sperm count resulting in male infertility. So in this discussion, you've been hired by the couples to convince the jury that the dye in the soft drink is causing male infertility. So for your initial post, you need to select 3 criteria from Hill's criteria and explain what you would need to see to meet those criteria. So we've got an example here. Let's say that I'm not looking at this scenario. Let's say that I'm thinking about establishing a causal relationship between smoking and lung cancer. I could pick the criteria of strength, and what I would need to see to meet that criteria is a really high measure of effect for the relationship between smoking and lung cancer, meaning I would need to see a really high odds ratio or a really high relative risk. I would need to see that compared to non-smokers, smokers have a much, much higher rate of lung cancer. For the second part, you're going to select one criteria from Hill's criteria that, given this scenario, it might be really difficult to meet that criteria and explain why that might be a challenge. And then by Sunday, you need to reply to just one classmate's post. In part 1 of your reply post, you want to think about your classmate's initial part 1 post and identify an additional Hill's criteria that hasn't been mentioned by your classmate and explain what you would need to do to meet that criteria. And then in the second part of the reply post, given your classmates part 2 post, how important is it that that criteria be met in establishing a causal relationship? So how important is it that that one criteria may not be able to be met when trying to establish a causal relationship between the dye in Alpine Fizz and male infertility? Does it kind of wreck the whole assumption that it's a causal relationship? Or maybe is it okay that you don't meet that particular criteria that might be really difficult to establish? So that's the plan for week 2. Please come to office hours if you have any questions on the material. I'm happy to go over any of it and all of it with you. My office hours are scheduled from Wednesdays on 12:10 to 3 on Zoom. If you can't make those office hours, that's totally fine. Please reach out via email and we can set up another time to meet. Have a great week.